Hello, and welcome to my 10th Deathmatch Civilization overview. I can't believe we're almost 1/3 of the way there. Today, I am going to be looking at the Khmer. Their elephant and scorpion combo makes them one of the most dangerous and deadly deathmatch civilizations in the entire game, and they are renowned for their amazing performance in all matches of the Legacy Cup too. In this video, I'm going to try to attempt to explain why this was, and in order to help me do this, I interviewed TheCode, who is probably the best player in the world with this civ. So let's hurry up because we have a lot of ground to cover. The first Khmer bonus is that no buildings are required to advance to the next age, which of course is not applicable for deathmatch. Next, the Khmer have two bonuses for their amazing elite battle elephants. The first bonus is a 15% movement speed boost, and the second one, in the form of the Tusk sword's unique technology, gives them +3 attack. Now, if you're unfamiliar with battle elephants, they're basically slow, yet very tanky and very dangerous cavalry units. Now, while the Khmer elephants are not nearly as fast as paladins or camels, they are definitely the fastest elephants. This means they can move around and get to different spots in the map faster than any other civilization's elephants. This also means that critically, they are able to run away from house, which most other elephants cannot do. Now, a few months ago, I made an elephant comparison video, in which I looked at the survivability of the elite battle elephants and the elite war elephant. However, I didn't really talk that much about the speed of the elephants, and I think that was a mistake, because the Khmer battle elephants are so great because they can run away from some of their counters. However, it gets better. The extra attack that the Khmer battle elephants get means that they have 5 more attack than paladins and more than double that of camels. Now, camels are created faster than the elite battle elephants, which in turn are created a little bit faster than paladins. However, at the start of a deathmatch game, they offer far more power because in the early game, nothing else can apply the same amount of offensive pressure in as quick a manner. And as such, you can get a very strong army out faster than almost every other civilization in the early game of a deathmatch game. I will admit that I previously thought Persians had the best elephants, but the ability to create the battle elephants at the stable means they're very fast and very deadly in the early game, and when combined with some other Khmer units, they can create the strongest early push in the game. Their next bonus is that villagers can garrison inside of houses. Now, in the early game of a deathmatch, this is very nice because you can save a villager or two. However, I do have one word of caution. Make sure the house is actually next to villagers and completed, because a foundation of a house cannot be garrisoned in, and you may as well have not started that house in the first place. While it's definitely possible to lose villagers in the early game of a deathmatch game for the Khmer, the reality is that this still does help if you are able to remember to use it. Moving on, their unique unit is the Ballista elephant. Now, as always, I've already looked at this in a previous video, but basically it's a very tough scorpion with less range and attack, but 6 times the HP. However, it costs 100 food, which makes it very difficult to simultaneously field alongside elite battle elephants. This means that the Khmer scorpion will almost always be the better choice. This is because the Khmer scorpions are not generic scorpions, they're probably some of the best scorpions. Let's talk about that. The heavy scorpions have 2 bonuses. Their first one is a unique technology called double crossbow. What this does is it allows the scorpion and the ballista elephant to shoot a second bolt. Now, in my Ballista Elephant versus Scorpion comparison video, I looked at it a lot more closely. But basically, for the Scorpion, it works the same way as the primary bolt, but with 5 less damage. As you can imagine, this greatly increases their damage output and makes it more than just about every other civilization in many cases. The other heavy scorpion bonus that the Khmer get is their team bonus, which gives them +1 range. Now, I already talked about this in, yep, you guessed it, a previous video. But basically it allows the scorpions to engage enemies sooner than a generic one, and therefore it kills them far quicker, and it allows the scorpions to stay safer while doing so. Combined with double crossbow, this makes them the best scorpion in the game for deathmatch. Almost all of these bonuses are pretty involved and complicated. However, I'm not taking that much time to talk about them because, in all honesty, I've already walked that ground and made several videos that have led up to this point. If you really want to learn the details, I suggest that you watch those videos. However, I think you get the picture. So let's move forward and talk about the Khmer tech tree. They have below average archers because while they do have hand cannoneers, they miss arbalest and thumb ring. In all honesty though, I don't make archery ranges that much because the Khmer simply have better options. Their infantry is also below average, because while they do miss champion and plate mail armor, they still have halberdier, which is the most important. And in all honesty, losing champion is not that big of a deal for the Khmer because they have elite battle elephants to deal with enemy huskarls and eagle warriors. Moving on, their cavalry is highly above average. Now, this might not make that much sense at first, because after all they do miss hussar, paladins, and even camels. However, keep in mind they have some of the best elephants in the game. As we talked about earlier, elephants create faster than paladins, barely, and have far more power, and as such, I think that those who are familiar with deathmatch and the way it's played know that the Khmer definitely have earned this grade. The Khmer siege is above average because they only miss siege onagers and they have the best scorpions in the game. Also, along with the Persians, they are the only civ that have elephants, heavy scorpions, and siege rams, which can be a super powerful and very deadly combo. I almost gave them a top tier grade in this situation, but I think when I compare them to another top tier siege civ such as Mongols or Celts, it's pretty clear they're not quite there. Having said that, however, their siege can be among the most dangerous in the game when used properly. Their defenses are above average because they miss bombard towers, arrow slits, and siege onagers, so they don't really feel like a true defensive civilization. On the other hand, their stable elephants are so quick that it's very difficult to rush them early, and as such they have a good early game defense, which definitely boosts their grade. The navy is above average also because they only miss heavy demo and two-man saw. So they do better than civs that miss shipwright or bracer, but they're not at the same level as some of the other navy civs. Now, as per usual, I'm going to grade neither their monastery nor their economy. However, there is some important things to note. For the monastery, they miss atonement, heresy, faith, and block printing, which means two things. The first thing it means is that their monks are less than stellar, and the second thing it means is that their elephants are, on paper, very easy to convert. However, in a real deathmatch game, the heavy scorpions and faster elephants can take down enemy monks and elephants very quickly, so it's really not that big of an issue if you look at the broader picture of the Khmer tech tree. For their economy, as I've said earlier, they miss two-man saw and they also miss guilds, which is unfortunate for a siege civilization to miss. But in reality, it's not that big of a deal because it's pretty easy to put lots of villagers on wood anyway. Overall, while the Khmer do have a few holes in their tech tree, they also have extremely powerful units that complement each other very well. As you'll see, this far outweighs any shortcomings they may have. And so, now that we know this, let's move on and talk about the most important part of this overview, which is deathmatch strategy. To get the best perspective on this civilization that I could, I interviewed TheCode. He is at the very top of the Voobly 1 vs 1 deathmatch ladder at the moment, and he's number 5 in deathmatch team games. He is absolutely remarkable for his performance in the Legacy Cup 2 recent deathmatch tournament, in which he won almost every single game he played in with the Khmer. He is better at this civ in deathmatch than anyone else in the world right now, and so I thought it would be incredibly valuable to seek his advice on how to play the Khmer. So let's jump right in. So it's very obvious that you have a winning strategy with the Khmer, and today I'd like to somewhat examine that and to learn how to best use the civ. So to start off, what is your opening build order with the Khmer?
That would depend on the map, the opponent's civ, whether it's a team game or 1 vs 1. But as a general recommendations, Like, if you are against a civ that is like halberdier oriented, that could be Japanese, Slavs, Britons, then I would recommend like building 1-2 stables that is immediately followed with siege workshops, and then add some more stables later. Because the main idea is that a lot of people has the perception that Khmer is some kind of a strong elephant civ, but I think their true power lies in the strength of its scorpions, that they are insanely good with their extra range and double projectile, so that makes elephants some kind of, expensive meat shields for that scorpions.
Yes, that definitely makes sense. So, would you change that order up a little bit differently, say, if your opponent was going for something like Cavalry or maybe Huskarls that would work pretty well versus the heavy Scorpions in the early game?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. It would very much depend what your opponent see and how does it start. But for example, if I see my opponent go massive Huskarls at start, then of course I would change my build order first stables, like at least 5 stables, with a lot of elephant cute, and then siege workshops. So when you reach the elephant plus scorpion army, then it's pretty much easier for you to kind of counter any army that could be made at start. So my logic with Khmer is that you need to have like 5 stables and like 8 siege workshops at start. But the order of building those depends like how close you are to the enemy, what is your opponent's civ, what does he make from, like, does he make stables, does he make barracks, those kind of things to optimize how you want to order those buildings.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So going back to what we were talking about as far as the Khmer Battle Elephant and Scorpion combo, that's one of the strongest and most effective compositions in deathmatch games right now. And in your opinion, what makes this combination so strong?
Well, in fact, that is very true, and I would even say that I think definitely Khmer, especially for the team game, is the strongest Age of Empires civilizations that we have ever seen in deathmatch. You ask what are the main reasons? I think first is that with the Vololo Kingdoms expansion, we have the ability to create elephants from stables, and Khmer elephants has accelerated movement speeds, which makes them really dangerous. If you consider the addition of the best possible scorpions in deathmatch with those elephants, they make a really fair combination. And I see one additional advantage with Khmer is the siege rams, because we have other civs that have scorpions and elephants like Burmese and Malay, but those siege rams give also additional boost to make really strong early push and also to maintain this push for Khmer.
Alright, so now that we've talked about what this army composition is, in your opinion, what are the best ways to actually use this army composition? I'm talking about map control, raiding, pushing, that sort of thing.
There are like multi-dimensional benefits of Khmer, but I would name as the first and the most important one is that their ability to make the strongest early push in deathmatch, that in a way that we have never seen in deathmatch before, because of like the fast elephants, fast scorpions. So you really want to make use of this and try to pressure your opponent as direct and as early as possible at the start, because this is your main advantage. But of course, there might be some situations that might not work efficiently. Let's say your opponent can be very far in the map and somehow can manage to camp like camels, halves, onager, scorpions on a hill. And for that case, you can consider attacking at different spots simultaneously with like small groups of army. Because if you make like 3 rams, 10 elephants and 10 scorpions and use them at different spots, the opponent will have to use like much bigger armies at every spot to stop this attack, and you will eventually gain map control.
Okay, so speaking about raiding and map control and that sort of thing, are there any times where you might change your army composition to maybe counter what your opponent's doing, or to change your strategy a little bit?
there might be some cases that you might deviate from your original composition. For instance, onagers are always a nice option to have if your enemy misses, let's say, scorpions, because you can always get some lucky shots which snowballs into an enormous advantage. Let me think, like, for example, Cavalier, I don't see any scenario where they could be useful because elephants are fast with Khmer. Light Cav can be a good option for late game raiding, especially if it's for 1v1 versus 1, when the gold is finished or it is small. I also believe that Halberdier can be a good addition for 1 versus 1 Khmer Wars, because even if you go halves and scores instead of elephants and scores, this can pay off in 1 versus 1 because of the cost effectiveness. I think bombard cannons can also, depending on the situation, good addition, because if your enemy is camping with onagers, scorpions and that kind of an army, you can always use bombard cannons to kind of prove all this camping with some shots.
So now that we're talking on this subject, in your opinion, what are the best strategies and unit compositions to use to counter the Khmer? So for example, what civs might work well?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we are creating the meta in Vololo Kingdoms and Khmer just recently, but I really feel like it's really hard to counter the Khmer. So sometimes people in the tournament, we also saw in the last tournament that people try to counter Khmer, Inca, Italians, those kind of civs. But I think they do not work because they are good versus elephants, but not as good versus scorpions. So the best civ to counter Khmer, that it must definitely have trade mill crane, because it must be fast at start. It must have either good halberdiers or camels, and definitely siege onagers and siege ram. So when I look at this composition, I think Saracens and Celts might be good options. But if the map is full of those civs, will also struggle. I think the only civ without siege onagers that can have, let's say, reasonable shots against Khmer, I would call it Franks, because their paladins are like produced insanely fast and they are very strong. So if somehow Frank manages to make good early raidings, like take out some villagers, then only then they might have some reasonable shot for beating Khmer. Like you gain an early advantage with villager killing, use your mobility to prevent like Khmer making a mass army and like destroy his economy with using your mobility and those kind of things, I think.
Okay, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And finally, now that we're closing out this interview, if you could give one simple piece of advice to players unfamiliar with the civilization, what advice would you give?
My advice would definitely, I think playing Khmer gives you understanding on the most important dynamics of that match, like how you should do your build order, how you should counter your opponent, how can you do the strongest early push, and how can you manage your economy. So if you make a certain build order, then what are the consequences of this build order for your economy, and how you should design your economy, how fast you should go for certain resources. So those kind of things are very crucial for that match, and playing Khmer is probably one of the easiest way to have an understanding of those things.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This interview has been very good. We've learned a whole bunch of things, and it's going to be very helpful.
Okay, see you.
See ya. I think this interview really does show the power of the Khmer. They do have some amazing units, but in fact, it's the way these units work together that makes them so strong. In my experience, the way you want to play this civilization is to rush your opponents as fast as you can, but make sure it's the most powerful rush that you can muster. If you've had a very clean build order, at around 3 minutes into the game, you can start to create some extra stables after your initial 5, as well as some castles and more town centers in order to quickly create an economy and to keep your initial push as powerful as you can. While playing as the Khmer, it's not uncommon to finish the game before the 15-minute mark because they are so powerful. At every stage in a deathmatch game, be it in the first 4 minutes or in the first 40 minutes, they'll have one of, if not the strongest and most population-efficient army composition in the entire game. In my humble opinion, this makes the Khmer the best deathmatch civilization. Now, I understand it sounds like in each deathmatch Civ overview I always say, "This Civ is so good at deathmatch," but that's because out of the last 5 overviews I've completed, I've done the top 3 deathmatch civilizations and 2 of my personal favorites, so that probably explains it. I'd hate to see how I'm like when I have to overview the Portuguese and the Vikings. But anyways, that's another story for another day. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you found my overview and the interview with TheCode to be enjoyable and useful. I can't wait to fight against you in the deathmatch battlefield, but until then, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. See you later, bye.